It's the last week of the election cycle. Feels like we've been in this for 4 years, and this should be the last episode where we don't know things. Hopefully by next week, we will know the results of the election and be able to talk about the results and going forward. So it's kind of one last episode talking about the differences in these candidates and what I think the possibilities of either one of them being presidents are, and should you vote for either one of them. Let's go. Welcome to The Homeless Conservative, a show about principled politics for exhausted citizens. I'm your host, Blake Fisher. I'm a political junkie so that you don't necessarily have to be. I'm also just sound like an actual junkie maybe because I had sinus surgery last week. And so I can still not really breathe through my nose. I am sorry that you get 2 episodes in a row of me not sounding normal. And I probably sound really obnoxious, at least to me in my own head. I sound really obnoxious because I can't breathe. So that's currently how I am. Recovering fine though. Everything's good. Not too bad a surgery, and other than the not being able to breathe yet. Still working on that kind of thing. So should be good. I should be able to breathe through the right side of my nostril, which I've not been able to do for a very long time. I thought I just had allergies. It turns out I've got a deviated septum and couldn't breathe through my right side of my nostril. So maybe I'll be like a superhuman after this and be able to actually breathe normal amounts of oxygen. Maybe it'll make me be able to exercise. Probably not. I'm not going to test that theory. So we've got less than a week till the election. This is the last episode that I should be speculating about anything, because we should hopefully know by next week what's going on. I don't know exactly what I'm going to do election night. I think I'm just going to jump in on Instagram or something. I don't feel like anyone really wants to listen to me ramble when we're probably not going to get results that night. I think it's pretty likely that this is going to come down to Pennsylvania and Arizona, specifically 2 states that are a little slower by their election laws to be able to count mail-in ballots, of which there are a lot. I talked about that on, I think, last week's episode, how Pennsylvania is now allowing the counting to start at 7 a.m. the day of voting, whereas it was 7 p.m. after the polls closed in 2020. But there are counties in Pennsylvania that are saying, hey, we're not going to have the mail-in ballots counted until Wednesday night at the earliest. So if it's close in Pennsylvania, I just don't see how, which, I mean, every indication is that it's going to be close. I just don't see that we go to bed on Tuesday night and know who is the winner. And so maybe next week's episode, we won't know who the winner is. It would be nice to have an idea of who is going to be running this country. And I just thought, last night, we're kind of in this final dash of the campaigns. Trump did a Madison Square Garden rally. And to me, that doesn't make a lot of sense. It's in a state that he's not going to win. New York is not a swing state, although he claims he can win it. I just love the delusion of Donald Trump and his supporters. It's absolutely mind-boggling to me that he can go, I think we're going to win New York. And his supporters are like, yeah, it's going to be. I mean, he's not going to win New York. He thinks he won California in 2020. He lost by 6 million votes, I think. He's a lunatic. And anyone who believes that he's going to win New York or California is also a lunatic. Sorry. It's going to come down to the 7 swing states. I don't see any real evidence that Democrats are going to flip any red states blue, or that Donald Trump is going to flip any blue states red. But the polls could be wrong. I already started talking to someone about coming on post-election to talk about polls. And let's see, were they right? Were they wrong? Did they overcorrect? Because there's always this huge conversation about polling after the elections when people feel like they were wrong or misled. And it leads some people to just dismiss the polls entirely, which I don't think is smart. I think that you can look at trends and look at Donald Trump is doing better in the last 2 weeks than Kamala Harris has in the movement of the polls. Now, the polls could still be wrong and he could not be winning, but his momentum at least is there across all the board in all these polls. And it just doesn't seem very likely that all of them are wrong in the same direction at the same time. So polls can be worthwhile, but we shouldn't look to them for everything. I'm with the people that don't think they're totally reliable, because they kind of burned us in 2016 and 2020. Could they get it wrong 3 times in a row, 3 elections in a row, underestimating the same guy? I think they could. I think that there's nothing that says that that's not possible, but I would think that they would learn the errors of their ways, and we maybe have more accurate polling in 2024. But it's also really hard to tell, because this is a very, very close election within the margin of error. And I just think it's worth going over that one of these 2 people, Kamala Harris or Donald Trump, is going to be the president. on January 20th, 2025. Who knows what kind of chaos will happen post-election, because I'm not convinced that either one of these people will just shake hands and concede the race. We know Donald Trump won't. We know he's going to claim the election was stolen. He's already claiming it's going to be stolen if he loses, without any evidence whatsoever. And Kamala Harris, I mean, let's not pretend, Donald Trump did not make up this stolen election thing out of whole cloth. There was precedents before that. Believe it or not, there have been Democrats that have claimed that elections were stolen. I know this is shocking to people, but it happens fairly often. In fact, it happens every time Republicans win. In my adult voting lifetime, it has been called an illegitimate election or a stolen election or an illegitimate president. It happened with George W. Bush. It happened with Donald Trump in 2016. And this is common refrain. So I just don't see any situation where we have, obviously, one of these two candidates could sweep the 7 swing states, and it would look like a blowout, no doubt. Even if all those swing states were very, very, very close electorally, it will look like a blowout. I don't. If that happens, maybe no one will contest it. I'm skeptical that half this country will not lose its mind next week. I think that that's what we're heading for. I don't see any evidence to the contrary, because understandably, I think if you're a Donald Trump supporter and you believe the lies that this is going to be another stolen election, you'll be incensed that another election was stolen from you, which is a lie, but it's a lie you believe. By you, I know it's not you that's actually listening to this. I know there's not a chance that some Donald Trump supporter is going to listen to me talk about Donald Trump in a negative fashion, because they just have to plug their ears and run away from that. But Kamala Harris is in a similar situation. Her supporters do not understand. Democrats do not understand that most of this country do not buy what they're selling. That's the insane thing to me. Jim Garrity had a piece on National Review this morning talking about how the country is split, Republicans, Democrats, and independents. And obviously independents have gotten larger, as we talked about a couple weeks ago on the show with the guy from the Independent Center. And that was a great conversation. If you haven't listened to that, it's interesting. But, independents have grown, mostly because people are leaving the Democratic and Republican parties. And most of those independents are closer to Republicans than they are to Democrats. And that's probably because of the disaffected people like me who don't like Donald Trump. And so they're maybe leaving the Republican Party, although I haven't yet. But leaving the Republican Party, but that doesn't mean that their values have changed a whole lot or the policies they think are important. And so independents align more with the Republicans. So these are registered independents in the United States than they do with Democrats. And what's foolish about that is that Democrats can't seem to concede that. I mean, Kamala Harris has in some regards, in the sense that she has moderated, I'm putting in air quotes, because she hasn't really, I don't think, moderated. I think she's saying the things that she thinks people want to hear, but she's not even doing it in a very convincing way, in my opinion. So, but, she's certainly moved away from the super progressive position she had in the 2019 race in the Democratic primary, because I think she realizes they're not popular. I think Joe Biden being the president, Democrats being in control of the White House and at certain points of Congress as well, have passed unpopular policies. And we can have this, the Democrats can believe all they want that Joe Biden was this consequential president, that he should be on Mount Rushmore, that he did these wonderful things, but the American people don't feel that way about him. And so they can try to talk themselves into it, or try to, they express this bewilderment that most of the country does not feel the same way they feel about Joe Biden. I don't believe in their heart of hearts they really feel that way about Joe Biden either. If they did, they would do it more convincingly, because it's so obvious that they want him to go away. He can't stop hurting Kamala Harris. And this is why I don't understand why she hasn't thrown him completely under the bus, because he is very, very unpopular. And yet even just last night, which I don't think this is like a huge deal, but on a call with Latino voters or whatever, I don't even know why they're having him do these kind of things anymore. He called Trump supporters garbage. And there's now this cleanup in the press where he's trying to say, I was talking about the comedian that called Puerto Rico garbage at the Madison Square Garden rally. There's all this cleanup of it. It doesn't matter. It just goes right back to the Hillary Clinton basket of deplorables thing. And it's not a good look for the Democrats to have to clean up Joe Biden's gaffe this week. He's obviously not fit to be the president. He shouldn't be the president right now. I don't think he should be the president for the next several months. He's not been popular. His popularity tanked with independents and Republicans and some Democrats after the Afghanistan withdrawal. It never recovered. That was not even 6 months into or I guess it was 6 months into him being the president. And it's never recovered since. And he's not a consequential president. And Democrats just cannot wrap their mind around the fact that he's not popular. And they want to lie to us and themselves, I guess, about how great a president he is. And the truth is Kamala Harris has to own that because she's part of his administration. And so she's dealing with that. Trump's obviously dealing with his own baggage as well. And so I think we're just in another situation where there's obviously both sides have their bases for sure. They're trying to turn out those bases right now, which is why every ad is negative and fear-mongering. And the goal at this point is like, look, everyone that's persuadable, I think we've talked to at this point. So now we just have to turn out the people. And that the way to do that is via fear. That's the best way to do it. I don't like that stuff because I think that it's normally the worst case scenario of a lot of this stuff is overblown. And for example, you can feel very passionately about an issue, like, for example, like gender transition stuff with minors. I am adamantly against that. I think it's scientifically proven to be bad. I think that it's not good for their mental health outcomes. I think there's all sorts of reasons we shouldn't be doing any sort of intervention with chemicals or surgeries with kids. We don't allow them, all sorts of things to get tattoos. However, I also don't believe that that's the number one issue in the country right now. I just don't think it's affecting the numbers of people that you would think by the number of ads we're seeing about that issue. But that's just how this kind of election stuff works. And to be fair, Democrats have embraced really extreme versions of that, and they should own it. They're going to have to own it. Like Kamala Harris is going to have to own that she answered an ACLU survey in 2020 about, or I guess it was 2019, about like she like believes in giving gender transitions and paying for them with federal taxpayer dollars for men in women's prisons. That's crazy. That's lunacy. Most of the people in the country feel like that's lunacy. That's not protecting women. There's all sorts of reasons that that's lunacy. But she can't walk away from it either because that's where her base is. And there's this weird, and so it's just been a mess. But here's what I wanted to do is that last night, I guess, or in the last couple of nights, Jimmy Kimmel, who I never watch any of these late night shows. I used to love late night television when Dave Letterman was the king of it, and it has just tanked ever since, and all of it's not funny. But I found this clip, and he did his whole monologue trying to convince Republicans to not vote for Trump. And he tried to be sincere about it, and it just fell completely flat. It wasn't, you can tell this guy's never talked to a Republican in his life, I'm pretty sure. He's surrounded by not just Democrats, but like Hollywood Democrats, which is just a different level of insanity, in my opinion. And so he can't even, like, he could have done a good job with this, I think. And there were some valid points and there were some other non-valid points. And it's interesting to me that he spent 17 minutes of his show trying to convince Republicans to not vote for Donald Trump without ever mentioning Kamala Harris or the lunacy or how vapid she is or anything like that. Just sort of, here's the words of Donald Trump's mouth. And it was, whatever. I just don't think it was very convincing. I don't think it was worth talking to Republicans. So I want to talk to everyone, if you're listening to this, and just tell you why I think both these candidates are dangerous. And then you can pick if you think it's worth voting for the lesser of two evils. You can say, I really like that person, regardless of what you say, whatever. I don't care. I don't think your vote is that important, frankly. If you're not living in one of those swing states, it doesn't matter. Frankly, I live in Oklahoma. Doesn't matter who I vote for. Neither one of these people get my vote. That's my honest opinion because neither one of them are deserving of it. I think they're both dangerous. I think Donald Trump is maybe more dangerous than Kamala Harris, and I'll get to why in a moment. But that doesn't mean that I think that I'm going to have some sort of albatross around my neck if I don't pick the right thing this time. Your vote is just a single vote. It's a single vote in a sea of a county, in a sea of a state that's probably a red state or probably a blue state. And your vote maybe doesn't, I don't want to say it doesn't matter, but the things you vote for down ballot will matter more than this presidential, because we're going to have a bad president, I think, either way. That's what I think. I think the next 4 years are going to be trouble because neither one of these people are very good at the job, and I'll tell you why. So, as mentioned in the last few weeks, it's only gotten as tighter. This is a coin flip race. It could go either way. So let's see what happens next week. But I think it's going to be very close. And like I said, I think that's potentially bad. So let's talk about the case about two of these people and why. Let's start with Trump. So there's been a lot of talk in the last couple of weeks because we've gone back to the fascist arguments. Is he a fascist? I think the thing that interests me the least about this kind of argument is that we can't even really define fascism very well. There's all sorts of arguments about it. And if you ask someone straight up, if I took a microphone out and started asking random people on the street, define fascism, I would be very, very surprised if anyone could, including me. I mean, it's got too many definitions, because there are even people that argue that, well, the Nazis weren't really fascist because whatever. And like, are there differences between Italian and German fascism and all this stuff? Look, I think that's why the fascist label and throwing it on Donald Trump is a mistake. I don't think that it works really well, but it's worth talking about, and I think it's worth saying, does he have dictatorial tendencies and stuff? So let's talk about specifically this week. The thing that came out was The Atlantic and New York Times ran these articles from quoting John Kelly, Trump's former chief of staff, and he was a 4-star general. This is a Gold Star dad who lost a son in Afghanistan. So this is someone that Republicans would generally believe, okay? And he has said, this is quoting him from this Atlantic article. Let me pull this up. Sorry. Okay. So, this is John Kelly. So, like I said, his former chief of staff. This is not just some random person. Looking at the definition of fascism, it's a far-right, authoritarian, ultranationalist political ideology and movement characterized by a dictatorial leader, centralized autocracy, militarism, forcible suppression of opposition, belief in a natural society hierarchy, Kelly said. So certainly, in my experience, those are the kinds of things that he thinks would work better in terms of running America. Kelly continued, certainly, the former president is in the far-right area. He's certainly an authoritarian, admires people who are dictators. He has said that. So he certainly falls into the general definition of fascist for sure. Kelly told The Times that Trump never accepted the fact that he wasn't the most powerful man in the world. And by power, I mean an ability to do anything he wanted, anytime he wanted. I think he'd love to be just like he was in business. He could tell people to do things and they would do it, and not really bother too much about whether the legalities were and whatnot. He also said Trump didn't understand the Constitution or the values on which the nation was built, and that it was a new concept for him that top government officials' loyalty was to the Constitution, not to the president personally. The thing about calling someone a fascist is that, in Trump's defense, and this is the defense you're going to hear about this, they always call Republicans fascist, and they're right. They called George W. Bush a fascist. They called Romney a fascist, a racist, and wants to put people back in chains and all this ridiculous stuff. They've said this about like every Republican that has ran for president, John McCain. Just they say it all the time. The reason I don't buy that here is that this is not the New York Times calling him a fascist. This is not the media. This is not Mother Jones, The Nation. These are not these like far left progressive people. This is John Kelly, his former chief of staff and a decorated member of our military and leadership. So these are people that worked with Donald Trump and said he's not fit and he does want his way or the highway, and he asked us to do things that were illegal. He asked us to do things that were war crimes. He doesn't have a grasp on the Constitution. He does not care about the Constitution. These are things that I care about as a conservative. And so if I'm looking at it through the lens of that, I don't trust Donald Trump with any sort of authority to uphold the Constitution, because he has not proven that he has a grasp on what the Constitution's role for him is. So, this is one of those things where it's like I wish maybe we didn't use the fascist word, because I feel like it just immediately turns people off. People just turn it off if you call someone a fascist. And I think it's understandable, because I do the same thing when I've heard this before. You guys said this about George W. Bush. You said this about John McCain. You said this about all sorts of people. And then the only Republican that the media likes is a dead Republican. Then they die and they're like, oh, look at this great man who was a great service to his country and stuff. And it just seems fake. And it seems very political. So maybe I wish we didn't use the fascism word. Maybe it'd be better to just lay all that information out and just leave the fascism part out of it. But I think it's fair. And like I said, I think it's worth listening to John Kelly about this. And the only excuses I hear about him is like, well, he's just mad because he got fired and now he's got Trump derangement syndrome. And there's no real explanation that explains like, why are these things okay? for things. Like John Kelly's a guy who volunteered to serve in Vietnam. He had actual bone spurs in his feet, and Trump skipped faking bone spurs. So, I mean, that's the difference in these two people. And who do you trust in that situation? And traditionally, Republicans would say the military guy. But it's pretty clear that we don't really care about the military. It's all cosplaying, essentially. So also in that Atlantic piece, Trump was quoted as Trump, those who have worked for him say, is unable to understand the military norm that one does not leave fellow soldiers behind on the battlefield. As president, Trump told senior advisors that he didn't understand why the U.S. government placed such value on finding soldiers missing in action. To them, they could be left behind because they had performed poorly by getting captured. I don't get it. What's in it for them? Standing next to John Kelly at Section 60 in Arlington, where John Kelly's son is buried. This is what he's saying about soldiers. He does not understand the military. He doesn't understand why anyone would do anything selflessly. Most people just say, I don't believe this quote. Okay, what is it though? Because then when Trump actually says these things out loud and is on the record, you go, oh, we shouldn't take him seriously. And my point is, it's all excuse making. And I think that deep down, reasonable people are concerned that someone would say this kind of thing about military members. Multiple sources has said he called people who died in war suckers and losers. He's done this at military grave sites. And to me, this is multiple sources. These are multiple A's. This is John Kelly. This is John Mattis. These are multiple people. It was confirmed. These are things that were it was ran at the Atlantic, and everyone called that fake news, but it was confirmed by Fox and Associated Press. Trump has suggested that Mark Milley be executed for treason because he spoke out against him. He has clear disdain for physically wounded soldiers. There's multiple sources telling his staff, it doesn't look good for me. Don't bring people that are injured around. He had a guy, there was this famous one where the guy was in a wheelchair. There was some trouble getting him around the stage. He was going to sing God Bless America and stuff. And Trump was like, don't ever bring that kind of person around here again. It's a bad look for me. I just think that to hand wave that away as okay as a commander-in-chief, like that's the guy that's in charge of the military. And maybe I take this more seriously because I've got a sister-in-law at the Naval Academy. So this is real. Like these decisions that the next president are going to make, are going to affect my family for sure. And millions of other families, or I guess maybe tens of thousands, hundreds. I don't know how many military members we have, but lots of people in this country are affected by that. No people in the military. And I don't know that I love the idea of someone being in there that has this kind of feeling towards the people that are volunteering to fight for our country. So he clearly has a disdain for the military and constitutional order and his way or the highway kind of thing. So my question to Trump supporters is this. Where is your line in the sand for his behavior? Is there, if you're writing all this off as hearsay or as lies, would they be disqualifying statements if you heard them directly from Trump, or would you hand wave that away some way as well? Because my point is, I think that if you think you're a conservative or you're a Republican and you're supporting Trump because you think he's better than Kamala, I think that's a fine position to have. Okay. However, I think it's important to have a line in the sand that says, like, these are the things that he could do that would lose my support. And the truth is, I don't think anyone thinks about those things in advance. And I think it's pretty obvious because those goalposts have moved over and over and over and over again over the last 9 years. And to the point where I don't think Republicans have any moral ground to stand on anything anymore. It's like, are you ever going to be able to call out someone's adulterous behavior as disqualifying? No, because you've had this guy who's cheated on every wife he's had. Are you going to be able to say that you want to support someone that's fiscally responsible? Because obviously Trump does not care about fiscal responsibility anymore. So how can you in the future ever claim that that's a thing that's important to you? I think you've got to decide where that line in the sand is. Where's your red line? So that, like, mostly that you could be held to some sort of moral standard when it comes to Donald Trump. But I don't think that that's very realistic. I think most people are just happy to play the team sport of the sort of religious version of politics that we have now. So people often rebut, and I think that, it's fair to do so about Trump, is that these are all warnings that we heard about him during the first administration too. So all of this was said about Trump in 2015. And I think that's fair. And I think he had some of these tendencies as well. I guess this is unprovable, except that I think it's pretty obvious. He hired, for the most part, good people in that first administration. And I gave him credit for that when he did it, because I was like, okay, look, he hired adults. He's listening to these adults in some situations. In some situations, it didn't work out like that. A lot of these people had to leave or were fired because they wouldn't do the thing that Trump asked them to do that they felt was morally wrong or illegal or unconstitutional. And so slowly these people were bled out of the administration. And by the end of it, by January 6th, you've got people leaving in mass. You've got people just resigning on the spot after how he handled January 6th and the lead up to it, and a lot of the stolen election stuff. The stolen election stuff, obviously, we've talked about a lot. I'm not going to go at it in length, but there is no evidence that the election was stolen. He goes on Joe Rogan's podcast this week for 3 hours, and Joe Rogan tries to ask him, like, give me some evidence about it. He's like, oh, well, we got so much evidence, but we'll talk about that at a different time. Donald Trump could have spent 3 hours laying out the facts of how the election was stolen in 2020, because tens of millions of people watched or listened to that episode of Joe Rogan. He could have laid it out for 3 hours. He could have laid out all the evidence. He could have named names. He could have cited evidence. He could have shown court reports. He could have done whatever he wanted to. He could have presented all of that information. He has never presented one shred of information because there is no information. There is no evidence that the election was stolen, and he's just going to keep saying it. And the thing is, Republicans have just gone along with it. No one's willing to call out that the election wasn't stolen. Those are the people that he's going to hire in his second term. He's not going to hire anyone that answers that question. Yeah, you lost in 2020. So the only way that he's going to hire anyone now is they have to be able to continue his lie that he won in 2020, and if he loses next week, he's going to do the same lie. He's already setting that up. So that complete loyalty to Donald Trump is issue number one for him, and he will surround himself with sycophants. He will surround himself with people that will not tell him when it's the wrong idea to do, whether it's just politically bad. He certainly had people that told him, "Hey, you will be hurt by that. Your presidency will be hurt, or your I don't know, the feelings of the American people towards you, or whatever." Like, that was how they got him to behave, was to tell him, "You will get hurt by this," and that will not. No one's going to tell him no. No one's going to tell him the hard truths this time around, and so he will be off the leash. And I just think that's a bad. I think it's a bad situation. I don't see how the institutions this time will hold up, because last time we had the institutions of Brian Kemp in Georgia said, no, I'm not going to help you steal an election. And Brad Raffensperger in Georgia said, no, I'm not going to help you steal an election. The Arizona county clerks and stuff said, no, I'm not going to help you steal an election. There were a few people that stood up and said no in 2020. Just a handful of people. There are fewer of those people now. Some of those people are not in office anymore. Certainly the Republicans in Congress have just kowtowed to him. There is no pushback against Donald Trump or anything he says. Every lie is excused or waved away as not serious. Every threat against like enemies within and using the military against American citizens is waved away as he's not really serious. Well, I mean, why is he not serious? He says he wants to do this stuff. It doesn't sound like there's going to be anyone in his administration to stop him. And so who's going to say no to him? And I think that's So I think it's fair to point out that, yeah, he didn't turn into a dictator. Although trying to steal an election at the end of 2020 is enough for me. That's enough to go, yeah, you don't care about the Constitution. You had no evidence. You knew it was a lie, and you tried it anyway. You tried to steal an election, and you for the first time in our history as a country, we did not have a peaceful transfer of power. And J.D. Vance and everyone around him is trying to be like, well, he did eventually give it over to to Joe Biden, as if that's like a okay answer, that like, well, eventually he walked away from it. I just don't think it's the right answer. And I think it's pretty clear that I think we're in trouble if we let that guy be the president of the United States again. And I do not think he's not going to hire Millies or Boltons or Kellys, Barrs, Pence, any of those people anymore. He learned his lesson. So he's got 5 cabinet level former staffers that explicitly called him out as unfit. He's got his vice president. He's got several high-level staffers and aides. There's dozens and dozens of people that have come out and said he's not fit to be the president. He does not care about the Constitution. He wants to be a dictator. All these warnings. You've got Dick Cheney. You've got Liz Cheney. And I know people just like to wave these people off as, oh, they're... I don't know what the excuses don't make any sense. People are acting like this is in Liz Cheney's political interest to be against Donald Trump. It's very clear that the grift is entirely on the right and is in the pro Donald Trump side. If you want to make money or be in the Republican Party or have power, you kiss his butt. That's what you do. That's how you make it. You don't turn against him. That's only lost people seats in the House and the Senate. That's only lost people their jobs. It's only lost people sway in any future political career. I think people like Nikki Haley are foolish to believe that they have a future in this party. There is no future for people like Nikki Haley. I wish she would just have stuck to her convictions. It disappoints me greatly that she's just all in on, well, I can vote for Trump's policies and not his personality, and be endorsing him and willing to campaign for him. I think that it shows a real lack of any the balls. It does. It's disappointing. I don't know what I expect, I guess, from people. Politicians will disappoint you. That's what they do. That's why I don't put a lot of faith in any of them. They're all looking out for them first. And I think that that's the priority number one. And that's Donald Trump for sure. So again, where's your red line? Is it using military against U.S. citizens? Because that's something he's threatened to do. Like, do you have a red line? And I think that's important to have. If you're going to hold your nose and vote for Trump, decide what that red line is. I think that's at least important to do, to say, like, these are the things that I would say I'm going to speak out against him at. Because keep in mind, your vote is not your sports team. You don't have to ride or die with them. You can vote for someone. It's a job interview. That's what it is. All we're doing is saying, do we think you'd be good at this job, or do we think you have been good at this job? So we're either firing you in a vote or we're hiring someone in a vote. Kind of depends on incumbency and things like that. We put way too much importance on this. Sometimes we get it wrong. Sometimes we vote for someone we think is going to be good and they end up being very bad at the job, and we go, you know what? You're out. Sorry. We gave you a chance. It didn't work out very well. No hard feelings. That's what your vote is. It is not. You do not have to be blindly loyal to that person forever, or defend them, or even agree with everything they do from then on. And that's what politics has become, is this weird thing where we think, well, if I'm going to vote for Trump, I got to full-throatedly back him at everything he ever does from now on. No, it doesn't mean anything. It doesn't make your vote any less, or doesn't make it any better, any worse. It doesn't make you any right or wrong. Just like you're hiring someone for a job, and it might not work out. You might fire them. We get way too hung up in the importance of our votes. So I don't think that I think the problem with Trump specifically is that there's no institution left that's going to tell him no maybe, other than the Supreme Court. And so that concerns me because also you've got J.D. Vance. Well, so I mean, like let's just take some of the court stuff, because I think this is an important part that both have in common, and I'll get to Kamala in a little bit. So in 2016, there was a court hearing a civil case fraud involving Trump University, and it was out in California, I believe. And he had a rally out there, and he called the judge a Mexican. This is a guy that was born in Indiana. Yes, he's got Hispanic heritage, but he's not a Mexican. And he said he was a hater of Donald Trump. He's a hater. He says she should be placed under investigation. This is the judge that takes the case. Okay. That's attack on the judiciary. So we've already got way lower. No one has very much faith in Congress. No one has a lot of faith in the presidency right now. And the judicial branch is kind of the only one that is even floating. And that's being attacked so often by the left and the right now that it's looking, they're trying to delegitimize not just the Supreme Court, but all the courts. This year, J.D. Vance, the vice presidential pick of Donald Trump, said, I think that what Trump should do, if I was giving him one piece of advice, fire every single mid-level bureaucrat, every civil servant in the administrative state, replace them with our people, and when the courts stop you, stand before the country and say, the Chief Justice has made his ruling, now let him enforce it. That's plainly saying that what he thinks Donald Trump should do is whatever he thinks he should do, and he should ignore the courts because they have no enforcement mechanism after they tell him something is illegal. That's dangerous. Does anyone, if Kamala Harris or Joe Biden said that, I don't believe for a second that Republicans would just be like, well, yeah, that seems reasonable. I think that they would be up in arms. I think you would be freaking out if Joe Biden said, let's see what the courts can make me do. And rightfully so. Okay, that is J.D. Vance, who's a smart guy. He's not an idiot. He knows what he's saying. He knows what he's doing. That is the vice presidential pick. He's saying, let the courts say whatever they want. We don't have to do what they say. I think that's incredibly dangerous. This is, by the way, someone that has, we keep hearing that the court is illegitimate because Donald Trump has stacked it with his people. This is J.D. Vance projecting a fight with the 6-3 majority conservative appointed Supreme Court. This is them saying that they're going to fight them, because I don't think they believe that they have them back. I think there's all this, if you read the media, you're going to think that the Supreme Court is just like in the pocket of Donald Trump. The Supreme Court rules against Donald Trump all the time. And they have in several different things. Sometimes they rule for him. Sometimes they rule against him. It seems like they're just doing their job. They're not illegitimate. But both sides, so this is coming from vice presidential candidate J.D. Vance, is saying, we'll just ignore the courts. That's what I would do. Just ignore them. Try to enforce it. I think it's a problem. The good news is most of these sort of loopholes that Trump's team tried to use in 2020 to steal the election, they've been closed. And so we can't even pretend that the vice president can do what he thought the vice president could do in 2020. So there's no chance that Kamala Harris can do the same thing. So there's fewer ways to legally go about trying to attempt to steal an election. But that just means that this conspiracy has to get deeper and more sort of evil to get a mob to do his work for him. And I think he will do that. I think that without the ability to go through the courts to claim, like if Donald Trump loses this election next week, I think that he will fight it. I think that he will try to stir up a mob like January 6th again. I just don't see any reason he won't try to do it. He's still excusing January 6th, says he wants to pardon those people. And, all the conspiracy theories about January 6th are also moot when you think about him for a second, because he claims it was a federal sting. It was like the FBI was in on it and they convinced all these people to do stuff. Well, you know what? They never even would have been in Washington if you didn't have your Stop the Steal thing. And they wouldn't have gone to the Capitol if you didn't tell them to from the ellipse. So it's really weird how you went along with everything they wanted you to do to make that happen. None of the conspiracy theories make any sense, but I think he will try to stir up a mob. And I just think that this is going to be really bad for the country, no matter what. Beyond all the dangers of his personality, we should at least talk about some of his policy proposals, which I think are ridiculous. Because maybe you don't believe me at all about the personality stuff. Maybe you think that we just take him too seriously, or there's all this overblown threat stuff. Okay, fine, you believe that. Okay, let's just talk about his policy stuff. That's it. Okay, we've talked about tariffs. His answer for everything is tariffs. He thinks he can pay for everything with tariffs. He also thinks that he can protect American jobs with tariffs. But again, my big problem with tariffs, and you can go back to the episode where I talk more about this, you can't do both those things at the same time, okay? If tariffs do the job of creating all this income for the country, then that means imports are coming in because you pay import tariffs when something gets imported. I know this seems very high concept for people, but so that means stuff's still coming in the country, which means you're not protecting American manufacturing or American production. Not to mention, there's a real misnomer here in the sense that people think that, things are either imported or they're built here. Well, that's not exactly true, because sometimes the parts are made and imported and then we manufacture the thing here. Sometimes we export parts to be manufactured elsewhere. So it's very, very complicated. But the point is, American manufacturing does not benefit if we're making all the money on the tariffs, because that means all the imports are still coming in. We're just making more money on them, okay? It might change prices and stuff like that. If you do successfully stop imports from coming in so that you protect American manufacturers, we do not have that income, but you protect those American manufacturers. But it can't do both at the same time. Yeah, you can try to weigh them to say, that's why tariffs traditionally have been used in a way of like, let's pick and choose. Let's do more tariffs against China because we think they're doing unfair trade practices. Let's try to get them to play fairly. That's fine. That kind of tariff is fine. That's not what Trump is talking about. He wants to do a 10 to 20% tariff across the board on every import, and some stuff even higher than that. That's going to wreck the United States economy. And this is not just me saying that. Okay, so here's what the Tax Foundation says. So let's look over at, that's not the right thing. Hold on. Let's go. All right, here is the Tax Foundation's judgment on what Trump's policies, so these are his tax policies, these tariff policies, all these things will do. So 10-year revenue, it'll be $1.6 billion. This is 1.6 trillion in revenue. Okay, so long run GDP down 2%, long run wages down 1.2%, long run full-time jobs down 786,000. These are just estimates, obviously, and these are trying to take in account the tax on tips and the he's proposed no taxes on lots of stuff. No taxes on Social Security benefits, no taxes on tips, no taxes on firefighters or police wages, no taxes on I can't even remember what all he's promised. Basically anyone he wants to get a vote from, he's just like, I won't tax you anymore. He's even talked about getting rid of the income tax entirely and just using tariffs to pay for it. It's not really possible. So this is the 10-year run. According to the taxfoundation.org, you can go look at all this information. It's in the show notes. This is what the long-term thing. So revenue goes up, but long-run GDP goes down, wages go down, and full-time jobs go down. So we have fewer jobs. This is not a good economic outlook. This is not a good thing. His answer for everything is tariffs, and frankly, he cannot solve everything with tariffs. He can't do it. Even if he could manage to do all this kind of stuff, like if he wants to, for example, eliminate taxes on Social Security benefits, that increases the rate that Social Security goes insolvent by 2 years. It moves it up to 2031. That's just like a few years away, guys. And it will at that point, if it goes insolvent in 2031, automatic 33% reduction in benefits. So if you're getting $100 in Social Security benefits, you're going to have $67 now that you get a check from. That's a huge, huge amount of money if you are relying on that for all of your income as a retired person. This would wreck the economy. These are really bad tariff ideas. Then we look at foreign policy. It's total isolationism. Isolationism. I can't talk today. I'm going to blame that on the surgery. It's probably not fair. Especially with Vance, who's called on us to abandon Ukraine. He claims it's because we need to focus on Taiwan, Israel. I mean, I just don't know that there's anything, because Donald Trump is trying to run this thing where it's like, look, there were no conflicts while I was the president. And I think he wants that to be the case again. I think Donald Trump was strong in some cases with foreign policy in his first administration, when he went after like Soleimani, for example, in Iran. But there were other examples where we had the opportunity to strike Iran and he didn't. I don't understand why Donald Trump and Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are so scared of Iran. Iran should be scared of us. And I just don't. So total isolationism, I think, is bad. I think American government should be powerful in the country, in the world. Because look, if we do not give security to our allies, if we are not a reliable ally in their security, they're going to look for it elsewhere. They're going to look for it with China. These countries are going to have to deal with China one way or another. They're going to have to deal with Russia one way or another. And they will. The idea that we're just going to get away with them. They're going to do exactly what we think they should do without us kind of helping them along is, I think, foolish. And I think that it's a world without the United States leadership in geopolitics, I think, is bad. And I think that I understand that people think that maybe some of it's a waste of money or something. That's fine. Let's have that discussion. I'm all for talking about like where's it smart for us to spend money? Where is it smart to send allies weapons? When is it not smart? When is it good? When is it bad? I think basically our foreign policy should be this. If we say we're going to back you, we back you 100%. And everyone in the world knows that. So that if we say we've got your back, we've got your back. And I don't think that Joe Biden has even done that very well with Israel and Ukraine. I think that he claims he wants Ukraine to win the war, but every time they ask for something to help them win the war, he drags his feet on it for 6 months and then eventually gives it up because he's so scared of escalation with Russia. Instead of going, yeah, we're going to give you what you need to win the war, not just to prolong it. And you look at Israel, it's sort of similar. He's had all these, Biden and Harris have had all these red lines, including, oh, you can't go into Rafah. We absolutely will not allow you to go into Rafah. And then they go into Rafah and they kill the leader of Hamas. Well, if you listen to Joe Biden, that guy'd still be alive. And so I understand that, like, people go, like, are you really with us? Are you saying you're with us, but you're really trying to dip the toes? I'm not saying we can't think smartly about all this stuff. It just doesn't seem that we are electing or nominating people that can think smartly about this. I'm not convinced that Donald Trump cares about foreign policy. He just wants to win and he wants to look good. In his first administration, he hired some good people that got some good stuff done. Abraham Accords were good. I think that there was actually the reason October 7th happened was because of the normalization of relations between Israel and other people in the region, and specifically with Saudi Arabia. And obviously Iran does not want Israel to have friends and allies in the area. And so they attacked. And, some of that might have happened under Trump too. I think for Trump to pretend that none of this would ever happen under him is not entirely fair. Some of it's just the nature of how this goes. But, it's at least worth bringing up. Yeah, I mean, maybe people were more scared of what we would do because he was more of a loose cannon and Joe Biden's not. I think there's some there for sure. I think the difference in a second term is that Trump does not have the smart people around him giving him good advice. I think that's unfortunately the problem. And, I just think that then look at the people he's surrounding himself with. RFK Jr., not a serious person. Tulsi Gabbard, not a serious person. Elon Musk, I'm torn on Elon Musk. I don't want to necessarily dive into the weeds with Elon Musk, but I think it's pretty clear that there are theories, and I don't know that I necessarily believe these yet, but there are theories that the reason Elon Musk has gone all in on Donald Trump and Jeff Bezos has had his paper, Washington Post, not endorse a candidate this year, and et cetera, is that all these billionaires have realized, hey, look, we could actually have the ear of a guy that we might be able to get some stuff done. And some people are sort of theorizing that this is like well, if American democracy is going to die anyway and we're going to have an oligarchy, we'd rather be in the oligarchy than out of it or being attacked by the deep state or the federal bureaucracy or whatever it is. I don't think there's entirely... I think there's some probably truth to that. It's pretty clear that Elon Musk has made a pretty drastic 180 in some of this stuff, and the way he talked about Donald Trump a few years ago, and just sort of the sort of ridiculousness of the sort of all-in movement of him. And there's some conflicts of interest there. These are all people that have government contracts. Are they going to be in positions of power where they have control over those contracts? I think there's some legitimate questions to talk about, but the truth is it's just about pure loyalty. That's the only thing he cares about. And I just don't think there's not a situation, there's not a conservative policy that I feel like Donald Trump is on my side on. I feel like you go, oh, it's the First and Second Amendment. He doesn't care about the First Amendment. He doesn't care about the Second Amendment either. It was his ATF that struck down the bump stock ban that the Supreme Court eventually overturned. That was Trump's ATF. It wasn't Biden's ATF. So he's embracing the unions, which I don't think unions are great. I don't really care about private sector ones. Like if you want to join a union, fine. But I do think that there's a problem with like the longshoremen that we talked about a couple weeks ago, being able to just totally hold hostage the United States economy and demand things like there not be any automation of their jobs. I think that kind of stuff is ridiculous, and Trump's just fully embraced that. He's to get their vote. There is no limited government with him. There's no reining in of spending with him. We will have no pro-life party at all if Donald Trump is elected. I'm just telling you, if you care about, if abortion is an issue that matters to you, if being pro-life is a thing that matters to you, Donald Trump is not pro-life. He's come out and said as much. He will completely change the party to be whatever he needs it to be, and he does not need pro-lifers anymore, and so therefore he's throwing them under the bus. So there's no pro-life party anymore. We are isolationist foreign policy kind of across the board, I think, whether Donald Trump or Kamala Harris win. So show me the conservative values there here. I don't see them. But you know what? Here's where Jimmy Kimmel failed. To pretend like Kamala Harris is a good candidate is ridiculous. So here's the case against Harris, okay? Unconstitutionality abounds. If all the stuff that I talked about Donald Trump with unconstitutionality and a disdain for the Constitution is even more for her, but it's worse because she knows she knows the Constitution. She's a lawyer. She's a former DA. She knows this stuff, and she doesn't care. And I think it's pretty clear that that's the case. She wants to pack the Supreme Court. She's calling the Supreme Court illegitimate. Now, the caveat to everything I'm going to say about Kamala Harris is that I don't think there's a chance that Republicans don't win the Senate. I just think that the map looks really good. Looks like they'll win Montana. Some people think the Republican in Nebraska will lose to an independent candidate. I'm not convinced that that's the case. There are Democrats that, like every 6 years, think they're going to beat Ted Cruz in Texas, and I don't see any evidence for that either, including Chuck Schumer's own super PAC gave $60,000 to Texas, where they were giving like $32 million in Pennsylvania. They gave $60,000, which I'm sure we had a joke I was talking about on last week's show that I do with some guys on Friday. I was joking about, like, do you think that they got that in a text message or an email and thought it was a typo and thought, oh, maybe they meant 6 million or 600,000? Nope, $60,000. That's how little faith Chuck Schumer's PAC has that Allred's going to beat Ted Cruz in Texas. So I think Republicans will have the Senate, which means Kamala Harris can't do almost anything she wants to congressionally, which means she will do the same thing that Biden did, I'm sure, and just try to cram it through illegally with executive orders. I see no reason. She's never once said that she wouldn't do the exact same things that Joe Biden did this entire presidency. It's just when Congress refuses to act, I'll sign something anyway, even if I think it might be illegal, even if it's the student loan forgiveness over and over and over again, that the Supreme Court says, no, you don't have the power to do this. And he says basically what J.D. Vance said earlier, try to stop me. You can say, let's see what you can do. I think Kamala Harris will continue that. But she's talked specifically, if she did have control of Congress, she would pack the Supreme Court. She wants to eliminate the filibuster to do so. You want to talk about abortion stuff. She does not want to restore Roe. That's what she claims she wants. She wants way beyond Roe. She does not want to go back to Roe. Roe had limits. Roe said at viability, states can make laws about if a child is viable outside of the womb, states can restrict abortions at that point. She does not want that. She's never answered what restrictions she would be allowed to have on abortion. She wants unfettered access to abortions throughout the land throughout 9 months of pregnancy. That's what she wants. She's never said anything else. And that is way beyond what Roe did. That is different. And she's willing to eliminate the filibuster in the Congress to do that. Now, she's not going to win the Senate, so I don't think it's going to matter. I don't think she can do that. I think she would either have to work with Republicans, which I don't find very likely, or she'd have to try to sign it via executive orders, which I think she would do, because I think that's what all presidents do now. They just go, well, I've got to look like I'm doing something, and if Congress won't do it, I'm going to do it. And then when the courts say that it's illegal, I'll say the courts are illegitimate. That's what the pattern now. That's what Trump did. That's what Obama did. That is what Biden has done. That's what Harris has done in excuse for Biden. That will be what continues to happen, okay? So she does not care about the Constitution at all. Don't pretend for a second she does. She's not serious. And she, if you care about the Constitution, I don't see that there's a huge bit of daylight between the two of them, other than I think that they are different in the ways that they would try to shred the Constitution. I think Donald Trump is egotistical and thinks that what I say should go no matter what. And Kamala is a little bit more political about it. But, like, does it really matter if in the end we have a constitutional situation where someone's doing something they're not allowed to do legally via the Constitution? I don't think it does. I think that they can both be bad. There's a lot of talk about lawfare, too. A little stuck on this one because it's a little bit, I mean, to me, they're the same. The Biden administration has done a poor job at handling the Department of Justice stuff with Donald Trump specifically. I think that it's been clearly politically targeted. I see no reason that they couldn't have brought the charges against Trump, specifically with the document stuff, in 2021. I see no reason they couldn't have charged him with the January 6th stuff or the post-election stuff in 2021 or 2022 at the latest. There was no reason for this stuff to wait until after he announced he was running for president again. There was no reason for this to sneak into the election year calendar. The truth is they thought Donald Trump would just go away, and when he didn't, they were like, oh, crap, we got to try to stop him. The 34 felony counts that people ever bring up about Trump is absolute lawfare, ridiculous nonsense. It should never be spoken of, because Donald Trump did not commit 34 felonies in the state of New York by trying to write a check to Stormy Daniels to pay her off for sleeping. I mean, it's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard in my life. Everyone knows it's a sham, and yet it's the albatross they try to just throw around his neck. Oh, he's a convicted felon. Well, yeah, I'm going to give Trump. I don't think that that's a legitimate case. I think that when you use a law that you've never used in that way ever before for anyone else, for a major nominee presidential candidate, that's lawfare. That is you using the law as a weapon to attack your enemies. And Donald Trump's promising to do the same thing if he's elected. He's going to use the Department of Justice for the same kind of thing. I know that he made the same kind of promises in 2016 and didn't really go along with them. But like I said, no one's going to stop him this time. There's no indication to me that Kamala Harris will not continue to do the same thing. She used lawfare against people she didn't like in California when she was the DA, when she was the Attorney General. There are all sorts of stories online that you can find. I'll try to link to one of them, where she was going after people for not their kids missing school and pressing criminal charges against parents for this and kind of ruining their lives to prove a point. And let's talk about if that's a good idea or not. But like, that is using the law to attack people to try to, for political gain on your part. And I think it's wrong. And I think that will continue under her. I think that the Biden-Harris sort of Department of Justice has been very, very bad, has behaved badly. Look, they're going after a whistleblower in Texas that exposed a hospital's continued use of illegal medical interventions with minors, gender kind of transition stuff. They're claiming he violated HIPAA violations, even though he very carefully redacted all the stuff that would identify any of the patients. But, then she's going around the country telling this story about this lady that died, a Georgia woman who died of a botched abortion. She's using that person's medical information illegally. And meanwhile, her Department of Justice is going after people claiming that that's what they're doing for whistleblowing on a hospital for doing something that was illegal. Texas had passed a law that said you can't do gender transition stuff. This hospital was continuing to do it. There's this doctor there that said, I'm going to step out. I'm going to say this is illegal. And now he's being prosecuted by the DOJ. I think this is so wrong. This is not just happening to their political enemies. This is happening to normal people too. Okay? I do not have any faith on her following the law and not picking winners and losers based on political affiliation. I just don't. As far as foreign policy, boy, she's slightly better than Trump, only in the sense that she does have an edge on Ukraine. I think we should back Ukraine. I think we should give them what they need. But I also don't see that the Biden administration has done that great of a job. As I mentioned earlier, I think that they're just like letting it limp along, and that's causing more deaths and more suffering instead of like, what are we trying to do to win this war, to end this conflict? She needs to have a plan. It doesn't seem like she has a plan, but she's at least backing them. So I'll give her that. She has that. For her to say that Iran, this is what she said in the 60 Minutes interview. I think it was the 60 Minutes one where she said Iran was the biggest threat, our geopolitical foe. Well, if that's the case, there's not a lot of evidence that the administration feels the same way, because they've done almost nothing towards Iran over the last 4 years. In fact, they have flushed them with cash. There's been all these sanctions that have been lifted and all this stuff. They so desperately wanted to get back into the Iran nuclear deal that they're willing to make all these concessions. And it's to a country that thinks we're the great Satan and has continued to attack us and our allies. It's not just Israel that we're talking about here. This is the Houthi-backed the Iran-backed Houthis in the Strait are attacking our ships. They're attacking other naval ships. They're attacking commercial ships. Joe Biden has claimed, and Kamala Harris have claimed, that like no soldiers have died under their watch, which is absolutely not true. We've had people attacked in Jordan by these rebels that are backed by and paid for by Iran. So she's not really, I don't see a good Iran policy, and I think we need to have a good Iran policy. And Iran's not the priority. I mean, it should be a priority, something we should take care of. We should be able to take these people out. It should be really easy so that we can focus on Russia and China, who I agree are bigger threats, across the board. That doesn't mean Iran is not part of this sort of axis of a-holes. This is like my favorite way to refer to them as. But we release all these sanctions, and that funds the very proxy stuff that's getting our troops killed or hurt. Like I said, despite them claiming that isn't happening on their watch. I think Trump has a point about the escalation of all these worldly conflicts coming under Biden, that they didn't happen under him. And I do think that is because of Biden's inaction and sort of unwillingness to do anything that might escalate a conflict. And I think our enemies are taking advantage of that. I think they will continue to take advantage of it through January. I think that they're going to go, look, we got this dope in the White House for the next several months. We should see what we can get away with before, because they probably think that Trump or Harris will be stronger than Biden. I don't know that there's a lot of evidence that Iran does not want Donald Trump to be elected. In fact, they specifically have had plots to try to assassinate Donald Trump in America. We were actually at an elevated threat level when he nearly got assassinated by an unrelated guy in Pennsylvania, which is crazy to me that was the elevated threat level of the Secret Service's plan, was to let a guy climb on top of a roof and take a shot at the current nominee for president. But Iran wants to take out John Bolton. They want to take out Donald Trump. They do not like them. I think they'd rather see, I think Russia claims they want to see Kamala Harris in there. Who knows what Russia really wants? Who knows what China really wants? But here's the thing. I think that these things are going to come to a head in the next 4 years. I think you're going to have a Taiwan situation in the next 4 years. I think obviously the Ukraine-Russia situation needs to come to some sort of end, or it's going to drag on for 4 years. I think the Israel stuff is obviously popping right now in the Middle East. None of this stuff is going away quickly, and these are all going to be huge problems that they're going to inherit. And I don't necessarily think that either one of Kamala Harris or Donald Trump are up to this job. I see no evidence that Harris isn't the same as Biden. In fact, I think she probably has worse foreign policy chops, because it's just she's so in the bubble. She was so in the bubble of California progressive that I don't think that she ever had to kind of expand her worldview, because that's where she did politics for so long. And I'm not convinced that being the vice president has made her better at foreign policy. She can't seem to answer questions very well about foreign policy. She can't seem to give us good, and I realize you can't project every single thing, but we should be projecting more strength than I think we are, and she's just not really doing it. So I would see that. Here's how I see the next 4 years going if she becomes the president. She's going to have to give progressives something, some sort of red meat they can chew on, okay? She can only do that one of two ways. She can either give them the red meat of abandoning Israel, because that's what the progressive part of her base wants to do. She might lose Michigan. She could lose this race based on the Arab voters that vote for Donald Trump or stay home because they're so upset about the Biden-Harris administration policy, because frankly, there's a chunk of people in this country that think that Hamas are the good guys. Or they think that Israel are the evil bad guys or whatever. And this is really complicated, obviously, but she could lose the election based on those people. And obviously, look at all the college campus stuff that happened after October 7th, some of which was very, frankly, anti-Semitic. I don't think that she's anti-Semitic necessarily. I just think that she's willing to throw those people some a bone every once in a while. She has to throw them some sort of bone. Well, if she wins and she doesn't have a Republican and she doesn't have a Democratic-controlled Congress and she can't pass legislation, she might not be able to throw them a domestic bone, but she will have the power to do things in foreign conflicts and in at least the rhetoric and the way she talks about these things. So I think that it's very likely if Republican Senate, she can't do the domestic thing, she's going to have to give them a foreign policy bone because she's going to be running for re-election from day one. If Kamala Harris wins on January 20th, she starts her re-election campaign. Everything she does at that point is about getting elected in 2028. I can't believe I'm even talking about 2028, but that's just the fact of the matter. Everything she's going to do is going to be about getting reelected. She's going to need her progressive base, and so she can't piss them off both domestically and foreign policy-wise. She will throw someone under the bus. I don't think she'll be able to pass the kind of crazy progressive policies that she wanted to in 2019 because she will not have Congress backing her to do that, and she can only do so much with executive orders, although she will try to do some of that stuff. So I do worry about what she'll do with foreign policy to appease that crowd. I don't think there's nothing good that comes from listening to that crowd. For her sake, for our country's sake, for the world's safety's sake, it's bad. Those people are lunatics, and she should throw them under the bus. She won't, though. She's clearly very captive by them because this whole entire race has been about how can she grab some Donald Trump supporters? How can she convince some men to vote for her? How can she convince some wives of MAGA supporters that they don't, it's a secret ballot. No one has to know. You can vote for me instead. Wink, wink. She's doing all this without ever conceding anything. So when people ask her what kind of restrictions would you be willing to have on abortions, she says none. When people ask her, what are the concessions you are willing to meet conservatives a little bit halfway? Like, how are you going to try to get these Nikki Haley voters? Are you going to try to balance the budget? Are you going to try to cut spending somewhere? Are you going to be against, are you for gender transition surgeries for minors? Are you for us paying for prisoners? Or you want men in women's prisons? You want men she will not compromise on any of this stuff. She just word salads her way out of it. And I don't think it's been helpful to her. It's because she's so scared of her base. And her base abandoning her specifically. And that's unfortunately where the Democratic Party is right now. I mean, look, the Republican Party is not in a lot better spot. I mean, both of these places are barely functioning. So I think she'll make really bad political decisions just like Joe Biden has, because Joe Biden's been listening to his young people on staff that tell him, oh, you got to forgive student loans. You got to forgive 8% of the population's debt, who all have master's or doctorate degrees and really good paying jobs. And we got to use taxpayer money of people that either went to college and paid their debt or didn't go to college. We're going to use their money to pay for these people because they're in your voting constituency. It's been largely unpopular, but he continues to do it, and she will do the same stuff. So she wants to keep them happy in some way to get reelected. And I think she's going to have to either throw Israel under the bus or give some sort of gigantic progressive giveaway at home. And I just think it's going to be less likely that she can do the domestic one. So in the end, that's a lot of ranting and raving about how I think both these people are terrible, terrible candidates, and that I don't think either one of them are worthy of my vote. People keep asking me, who are you going to vote for, blah, blah, blah. Like I said, doesn't matter. I'm in Oklahoma. Donald Trump's going to win every single county here. So me voting for Kamala Harris because I hate Donald Trump, it's not really going to help anything. And frankly, I'd rather send the message that neither one of these people are qualified to be the president of the United States. And I think that we deserve maybe we don't deserve. I think maybe the American electorate are to blame for this. I mean, we are to blame for this. This is our fault. This is no one else's fault but the voters when it really boils down to it. So, but if I really have to like get down to brass tacks, I'm more worried about a Trump administration than a first Harris administration because I think Republicans win the Senate. And so she is a lot more chained than he is. I can see where the institutions will hold. As a conservative, frankly, it's just better for conservatism. It's better for right of center thinking if Democrats are in charge because we're going to push back on them. I think that we get to call out the bad policies of Democrats when they're in power a lot easier than when they're not, because it's all theory when they're not in power. When they're in power and they're the ones making these decisions, we get to go, look, you can tell us you'd be good at this, but look at the last 4 years. Prices are higher. People don't feel like they're better off. People don't feel like the economy's better. People are pissed about all sorts of things that you guys did, and you're not going to be on Mount Rushmore. People don't feel that way about Joe Biden. And so it's voters' choice here. And I think that voters get the blame for the bad candidates too. I think that's totally fair. So, and like to be totally clear, I think Kamala Harris will be a terrible president if she's elected. I think that she will be bad for Democrats. I think she'll be good for Republicans. I think she'll be good for conservatism because I think she will be bad at the job. She's shown me nothing that shows me she'd be a good vice president, a good senator. She's not good at these jobs. She's not a good executive. And I think she will be a terrible president. I just think she's slightly less dangerous because she will be more held in check by institutions than Donald Trump would be. But Donald Trump is definitely a threat to conservatism and is most likely a threat to the Constitution. He does not care about conservatism. So we know that. He's already ruined the Republican Party, in my opinion. But I think he's also a threat to the Constitution because he just doesn't care about it. He only cares about himself. Harris mostly neutered by a Republican-controlled Senate. So that's really where this boils down to me. So does that mean that she deserves your vote? I don't know. If you don't live in one of those 7 swing states, I don't know that it really matters, and you shouldn't stress about it too much. My vote's not going to matter for president, so I'm more likely to leave it blank just to send the message, hopefully, if you see a message that like neither of these candidates were worth my vote. A normal Republican would have gotten my vote, or even a competent Democrat. If Josh Shapiro is running right now, I'm voting for Josh Shapiro. Gretchen Whitmer. I mean, these are people I don't agree with on almost any policy, but I would vote for them because I also know they're not going to burn the country down. I'm not convinced that Kamala won't do so, not out of some sort of nefarious scheme. I just think that she will be potentially that bad at the job, but we'll see. What bothers me is that there are a lot of Republicans that are going to hold their nose and vote for Trump because he's the lesser of two evils. And that's defensible, I suppose, but not without some sort of red lines. Like I said, I think if you're a conservative, you consider yourself conservative, you've got to right now say that, here's my red line. If you just continue to roll over and make excuse after excuse for him without any sort of real guiding principles or ideals, then you're a bad voter. Like, I just don't think you're doing what our job is as Americans. Like, this is supposed to be a job interview, and it's also supposed to be a job like a quarterly, let's just check out and see how you're doing, okay? Except we do that every 4 years with the president, and we say, yes, no, did a good job, let's get you out of here, or yeah, we think we did good, let's keep you in for another 4 years. I just don't think we're doing our jobs if we don't have some sort of litmus test for if they're doing a good job or a bad job. And I think that, so if you're going to vote for Trump, do it. That's fine. If you're going to vote for Harris, that's fine. I think it's just important to have those things in mind as an American citizen to say, these are the things that I think are disqualifying. These are the things that would make me not vote for them again. These are the things that I would speak out and say, I think that's wrong. But it doesn't appear that there's a limit to the support that Republicans are going to give Trump. And that's why I think he's dangerous, is because he's learned that he can do whatever he wants and he can get away with it in his GOP that he's rebuilt around him. Evangelicals. I mean, we have thrown away all moral high ground and to defend a serial sexual predator and cheater because that's what he demands. And social conservatives. Like I said, we're not going to have a pro-life party in this country if Donald Trump wins. That's the simple fact of the matter. There will be no more pro-life party. We will have 2 pro-choice parties. And and that's because he does not care about your issue. He cared about getting your vote. You've got to decide if the Supreme Court justices were worth that trade, because he does not care about the pro-life movement. He doesn't care about social conservatism. He doesn't care about fiscal responsibility. He doesn't care about anything. I simply do not believe there's anything Donald Trump could do to lose the support of most Republicans now. And that's what bugs me. And that's why this thing is called the homeless conservative. And I assume you probably feel the same way if you're listening. So the whole point of all this is both these people are going to be bad presidents. I think that we're in it for a long haul. I don't think that things are going to get a lot better in the next 4 years. I don't know if they'll get worse. I don't think, I don't see a situation where things are normal in 2028 and we have like a normal Republican Party and a normal Democratic Party. I think the lessons learned from either loss are going to be potentially the wrong lessons. I think if Kamala Harris loses, it'll be really easy to blame everything on Joe Biden. And I think that'll be fair, but I also think that they need to do some introspection of like, why didn't we force Biden out earlier? Why did we pick Kamala Harris? Why didn't we actually have a primary? Why didn't we pick someone that was more competent? Why didn't we pick someone we had faith in? Why did we put all this? Why did we pick Kamala Harris just because she's a black woman? And maybe not pick someone that would have been better at the job. They're not going to ask those tough questions. They're just going to blame it on Biden and walk away. If Trump loses, he's going to say the election was stolen. And there's going to be no lesson learned on nominating the same guy 3 times in a row and potentially losing the White House or Congress. Who knows what we'll lose. Like I said, I think Republicans keep the Senate no matter what. But I think that's the worst case scenario for Republicans is they have the Senate and not the House or the presidency. But that's not great either. To not be able to beat the Biden-Harris administration is like I said, I don't think there'll be any introspection there to go like, well, maybe Donald Trump was he couldn't even beat Joe Biden or Kamala Harris, who are very, very bad candidates. I think we'll learn all the wrong lessons. So I think things will continue to get worse. And the point is, politics shouldn't be your life anyway. I mean, like I said, I love this stuff and paying attention to it, but I am ready for it to be normal again. I would love to just have some boring executive that just does their stuff. I'd love just like a wonky George H.W. Bush again. That'd be great. I don't think we're getting that anytime soon. I think we're too into the politics as religion. I think we're too much into the tribal team sport stuff. And I just don't see any pulling back of the reins because I don't think the parties are strong enough to do what would be necessary to do that. So good luck. We will hopefully know next week who is the winner here, and we can stop talking about theories and we can start talking about like what will actually happen. We'll see. Like I said, we'll be surprised. If I had to pick right now, I think Donald Trump does have an edge going into the last couple weeks of the election. It's clearly he's got some momentum, but I still think everything's a coin flip. Everything's within the margin of error on these polls. I am very curious to have conversations afterwards about were polls right, were they wrong. I think this will be interesting stuff. I'm also just excited to talk about actual policy stuff instead of these two people. We're going to have some idiot in the White House in January, no matter what. And I don't love to name call, but frankly, both these people are idiots. Donald Trump's an idiot. Kamala Harris is an idiot. We will largely be helped or hurt by the people they hire and surround themselves with. I'm not convinced Kamala Harris can do that. She's had a lot of staff turnover. I don't think she's done a great job as vice president or any other kind of seat she's ever had. I don't know that Trump will hire adults. I think he learned his lesson, as I said. So I think that we're going to have dumb people surrounded by people that tell them what they want to hear. And I think that's a bad way to be the president. I think it's better to have smarter people around you, even if they disagree with you. Unfortunately, we have a bunch of people with very, very, very fragile egos that are in the White House now, which is so strange because you have to have such a big ego to run for president. And yet it's very clear that Biden is very insecure about his brain. It's very clear that Donald Trump is very insecure about lots of things. It's very clear that Kamala Harris is very insecure about a lot of stuff. And it's just weird to me that we can't get someone that's just, secure in their own personality and beliefs. Like that's the bare minimum that I'm asking for from a presidential candidate. And we can't get it. We haven't gotten it. We had plenty of people in the Republican primary and we said no to them. So that's on Republicans. At least Democrats didn't get a say in theirs this time around. So they can blame that. They can once again blame Biden for that, but Republicans have no one to blame but ourselves. So that is it for me. I will, like I said, I will keep up to date on Instagram and YouTube. And I will announce sometime in the next couple of days what I'm going to do. Like I said, I think election night, I'll just pop in on stories on Instagram. I'll probably hop on a couple of other people's shows too. So pay attention if you do want to pay attention that night. Like I said, I don't think we'll know who wins, but maybe there will be some interesting stuff to talk about. I may go live. We'll see. I don't know what people want. If you've got an idea of what you want, tell me what you want. I'll do that. That's probably a good place to start. That's it for me. I will catch you next time when hopefully we know who the next president is.